Welcome, grade sevens. This is lesson 14.5. How has movement from the country life into the cities affected rural communities in Canada? We will discuss that question in today's lesson. So stick around and let's learn something.
I'm willing to bet right now that your address falls within an urban community as opposed to a rural community. This is lesson 14.5. How has movement from the country to the cities affected rural communities in Canada? Right now, the majority of Canadians do live in an urban environment. And this map here, over 3 billion people on the planet live in an urban environment. In Canada, over 80% right now, it's hard to see on this screen, but over 80% of Canada's population lives in an urban environment. But that wasn't always the case, because prior to the 1930s, the majority of the people did not live in an urban community. They lived in farming communities. They lived in rural communities. And over time, urbanization occurred, and that's when people left those countryside homes and they moved into these urban cities, into these urban areas. And it really saw the boost at the end of the Second World War, when we were experiencing an economic boom. That, combined with valuable resource discovery here in the West, like 1947, when oil was first discovered in Leduc, Canada then quickly becomes a world leader in this oil and gas, and now families are moving into the cities. Now, it's important to know, okay, we're talking about oil and gas. All of a sudden, wheat is still very important, but it's not the only resource that exists anymore. Now we've got another resource, oil and gas, to supplement that resource. And this leads to growing cities. By the 1980s, only half as many farmers in Western Canada were there than had been in 1940. So the decline of the farming community is happening. And by the early 2000s, and I just said this in the couple of previous slides, over 80% of our population is in urban areas compared to 37% in urban areas in the early 1900s. And you can see these are Canada's largest communities. We've got Toronto as our largest urban center, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Quebec, Hamilton, and you can read the rest of them. But these are our largest urban centers right now in Canada. So why are people moving to the cities, right? There's got to be some reasons. Well, number one, our jobs. After the Second World War, the factories were in urban centers. Farming was not a steady, reliable income, but factory jobs were. There were larger farms, but there were fewer farms. New farming technology was introduced, and it meant that fewer people needed to work the farm. The equipment for these farms was really expensive, so small family farms just couldn't compete with the large commercial farming outfits that were there. And over time, because of this new equipment, because the small family farm was being let go, the farms now are becoming bigger. Because of that, the farms themselves were becoming bigger, but they weren't adding any more people. So now we have our towns shrinking. So rural towns begin to lose their population, and customers to the various shops in those small towns are declining. This picture here, before I go on, this is the urbanization. This is the population map of Canada's population, and you can see the majority of the people live about 100 kilometers or so away from the American border, which is just kind of a neat fact there. And the last reason that people were moving to the cities was because newcomers, our immigrants, preferred living in cities compared to farms. Farmland, rural land is not very cheap. It was once cheap, but not anymore. and there's just more jobs available in our cities for our increasing population. You yourself are probably living in a city. You yourself, when you are graduated and when you are entering into the workforce, you yourself are probably going to find a job in a city. Maybe not the same city that you live in right now, but you might move to a different city. But you'll probably, safe to say, you will stay in an urban area. All right, I want you to head over to your notebooks and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.